He adopted a black girl 23 years ago. What she did for him years later left everyone in tears. The rain hammered against the cracked windows of the old farmhouse like bullets against armor. Each drop a reminder that some storms never truly end. Thomas Blake's weathered hands trembled as he reached for the pill bottle on his nightstand. The same hands that had once steadied a rifle in Vietnam, that had changed countless diapers, that had braided a little girl's hair every morning for school. The bottle was empty. Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to our channel, where real stories touch real hearts. I can already feel the love from viewers tuning in from around the world. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from today. How are you doing? And if this is your first time here, you're about to witness something extraordinary. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, because stories like this one remind us why human connection matters more than anything else in this world. Thunder crashed overhead as Thomas struggled to his feet, his 78-year-old body betraying him with every movement. The floorboards groaned under his weight. The same boards where tiny feet had once raced through these halls, where laughter had echoed during Saturday morning pancake breakfasts, where tears had been shed over scraped knees and broken hearts. But tonight, the house fell hollow, empty, dying, just like him. The phone on the kitchen counter buzzed with another missed call. The display showed 17 unread messages, all from the same contact, Dr. Kiana Winters. The name that had once been scrawled in crayon on construction paper Mother's Day cards now appeared on medical journals and hospital directories across 3 states. Thomas ignored the phone, just as he'd ignored it for the past 6 months. Some conversations were too dangerous to have. Some truths were too heavy to carry. He shuffled toward the front door, drawn by a memory that felt more real than the present moment. 23 years ago, on a night just like this one, his life had changed forever. The storm had been just as violent, the darkness just as complete. But on that doorstep, wrapped in a soaked blanket, had been the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. A baby girl with eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages, abandoned and alone, but somehow meant for him. The neighbors had whispered. His own brother had stopped speaking to him. The town had watched with suspicious eyes as a white war veteran raised a black child in rural Tennessee. But Thomas had never wavered, not once, because the moment he'd held that tiny hand in his, he'd known she was his daughter in every way that mattered. Now, as his heart struggled against the medication he could no longer afford, as the bank notices piled up on his kitchen table, as his body slowly surrendered to the illness he'd hidden from everyone, including her, Thomas wondered if he'd made the right choice all those years ago. Had he given Kiana the life she deserved? Or had he been selfish, keeping her in a world that would always see her as different? The front door creaked open under his touch, and Thomas stepped onto the same porch where he'd found his miracle. The rain soaked through his thin pajamas instantly, but he didn't care. Somewhere out there, 3 states away, his daughter was saving lives in a pristine hospital, surrounded by colleagues who respected her brilliance, living the life he'd always dreamed she'd have. She didn't need to know that the man who'd raised her was dying alone. She didn't need to know about the foreclosure notice. She didn't need to know that every pill he couldn't afford brought him one step closer to joining his late wife, Sarah, in whatever came after this life. But as Thomas stood there in the storm, something caught his eye. Headlights, cutting through the rain like twin beacons of hope, growing brighter with each passing second. His heart stopped, because there was only one person who knew to take the old dirt road to his house. Only one person who had a key to the gate he'd locked months ago to keep the world out. The car pulled into his driveway, and through the rain-streaked windshield, Thomas saw a face that made his knees buckle with recognition and terror. Kiana had come home, and from the determined set of her jaw, the way she gripped the steering wheel like she was preparing for battle, Thomas knew with absolute certainty that his carefully constructed walls of silence were about to come crashing down. The question that would haunt him for the rest of this night, however long that might be, wasn't why she'd come. It was how much she already knew. What do you think brought Kiana back after all these months of ignored calls? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I love hearing your theories. And if you're feeling the emotion already, smash that subscribe button, because this story is just getting started. The car door slammed shut with the finality of a judge's gavel, and Dr. Kiana Winters stepped into the storm like she was walking into an operating room, focused, determined, and absolutely terrified of what she might find. At 31, she commanded respect in surgical suites across the country. Her hands had saved hundreds of lives. Her mind had solved medical puzzles that stumped entire teams of specialists. And her reputation had opened doors that remained closed to others who looked like her. But standing in the driveway of her childhood home, watching the man who'd given her everything struggle to stay upright on his own front porch, she felt like that scared little girl again. The one who used to hide under the kitchen table during thunderstorms until strong arms would lift her up and whisper that everything would be okay. Daddy. The word escaped her lips before she could stop it, carried away by the wind, but somehow reaching him anyway. Thomas Blake had been many things in his 78 years. A soldier who'd earned 3 Purple Hearts in Vietnam. A husband who'd loved his wife, Sarah, with the kind of devotion that made neighbors believe in fairy tales. A father who defied an entire town's prejudices to raise a daughter who wasn't his by blood, but was his by choice. But he'd never been a liar. Until now. Kiana. His voice cracked like old leather. What are you doing here, sweetheart? She moved toward him with the measured steps of someone accustomed to delivering devastating news to families in hospital waiting rooms. Her designer coat, a far cry from the hand-me-down she'd worn growing up, was already soaked through, but she didn't seem to notice. Mrs. Henderson called me. Kiana's voice carried the authority she'd learned in medical school, but underneath it, Thomas could hear the little girl who used to demand bedtime stories about brave princesses. She said you haven't been to town in 3 months, that your mailbox is overflowing, that the pharmacy keeps calling about prescriptions you haven't picked up. Damn Ethel Henderson and her eagle eyes. The woman had been watching his house like a hawk ever since her husband died last spring, probably out of boredom more than genuine concern. But Thomas had underestimated how much the old busybody actually cared, and how quickly she'd track down his daughter when she sensed something was wrong. I'm fine, Thomas said, the lie tasting bitter on his tongue. Just been busy with projects around the house. Kiana's eyes, those same wise eyes that had stared up at him from a rain-soaked blanket 23 years ago, swept over the property with clinical precision. The sagging gutters, the peeling paint, the front steps that had developed a dangerous lean, the garden that Sarah had once tended with such love, now overrun with weeds. Projects, she repeated, and Thomas heard the skepticism that had made her one of the youngest department heads in her hospital's history. Is that what we're calling it? She climbed the steps slowly, and Thomas noticed things he'd hoped she wouldn't see. The way she favored her left leg, a reminder of the car accident that had nearly ended her surgical career 2 years ago. The exhaustion etched around her eyes that spoke of too many 18-hour days and not enough sleep. The slight tremor in her hands that only someone who'd watched her grow up would recognize as a sign that she was fighting back tears. His brilliant, beautiful daughter was running herself into the ground, trying to save everyone else's lives. And here he was, adding to her burden. You look tired, he said softly, reaching out to touch her cheek the way he had when she was small and had nightmares about the storm that had brought her to him. Don't. Kiana stepped back, and the word came out sharper than she'd intended. Don't you dare try to take care of me right now, Thomas Blake. Not when you're. She gestured helplessly at him, at the house, at the obvious signs of a man who'd been slowly disappearing from the world. The use of his full name hit him like a physical blow. She only called him when she was furious or scared, usually both. Like the time she'd been suspended from school for fighting with a boy who'd called her adopted. Like the night she'd come home from her first date with a split lip and refused to tell him what happened. Like the day she'd left for college, terrified that the world beyond their small town would chew her up and spit her out. How long? She asked, and Thomas knew she wasn't talking about the house repairs. Kiana, how long have you been sick? The question hung between them like a blade, sharp and unavoidable. Thomas had rehearsed this conversation 100 times in his head, had planned exactly what he'd say if this moment ever came. But standing here, looking at the woman his little girl had become, all his carefully prepared words crumbled to dust. The diagnosis came 8 months ago, he said finally. But I've been feeling off for about a year. Kiana's composure cracked like ice under pressure. 8 months? 8 months, and you didn't think to tell me? Your daughter? The doctor? You had your own life to live. Your career, my career. Kiana's voice rose above the storm. My career exists because of you. Everything I am, everything I've accomplished, every life I've saved, it all started here in this house, with a man who saw an abandoned baby and decided she was worth loving. The words hit Thomas harder than any physical pain he'd endured, because buried in her anger was the truth he'd been running from for months. He hadn't just been protecting her from his illness. He'd been protecting himself from the possibility that she might choose her successful life over his failing one. I didn't want to be a burden, he whispered. Kiana stared at him for a long moment, rain streaming down her face like tears. Then she did something that transported him back 23 years, to a tiny girl who used to crawl into his lap whenever the world felt too big and scary. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, holding him with the fierce protectiveness of someone who'd learned that love was a choice you made every single day. You could never be a burden, she said against his chest. You're my father, and I'm not going anywhere. But even as Thomas melted into his daughter's embrace, even as he felt the first spark of hope he'd experienced in months, a part of him knew that the hardest conversations were still ahead. Because Kiana didn't know about the foreclosure. She didn't know about the experimental treatment he'd refused because he couldn't afford it. And she definitely didn't know about the letter hidden in his bedroom drawer. The one that would explain why a white war veteran had been so determined to save a black baby girl that he'd risked everything to give her a home. Some secrets, Thomas thought as thunder crashed overhead, were too dangerous to survive the light of day. But as his daughter held him in the storm, he began to wonder if some secrets were too dangerous to keep buried. The bond between them is already breaking my heart. What do you think Thomas is hiding in that letter? Share your theories below, and don't forget to subscribe. This emotional journey is far from over. Inside the house, the silence felt heavier than the storm raging outside. Kiana moved through the rooms of her childhood like a detective gathering evidence, and every detail she discovered made her heart sink deeper into her chest. The refrigerator contained nothing but expired milk and a half-empty jar of peanut butter. The medicine cabinet was a graveyard of empty prescription bottles. The stack of unopened mail on the kitchen table told a story of mounting bills and final notices that made her stomach clench with fury and heartbreak. But it was the photograph on the mantelpiece that stopped her cold. There she was at age 7, gap-toothed and grinning, sitting on Thomas's shoulders at the county fair. His face was radiant with pride as he pointed toward the Ferris wheel, probably promising her they'd ride it together despite his fear of heights. Behind them, barely visible in the background, stood a woman Kiana had never seen before, a black woman with kind eyes and a familiar smile, watching them with an expression of profound sadness. "Daddy," Kiana called, her voice echoing through the house. Who is this woman in the photo? The crash in the bedroom made her blood run cold. Kiana sprinted down the hallway, her medical training kicking in before her emotions could catch up. She found Thomas on the floor beside his bed, his face gray with pain. One hand clutched to his chest while the other reached desperately toward the nightstand. "Chest pain?" she asked, dropping to her knees beside him, her fingers automatically finding his pulse. "Rapid, irregular, weak." "Pills," he gasped. "Top drawer." Kiana yanked open the drawer and froze. Inside was an envelope marked "For Kiana, to be opened only after my death," in Thomas's careful handwriting. Beneath it lay a bottle of nitroglycerin tablets with an expiration date from 6 months ago. "These are expired," she said, her voice tight with controlled panic. "How long since you've had fresh medication?" Thomas's only answer was a groan of pain that cut through her like a scalpel. Without hesitation, Kiana pulled out her phone and dialed 911, but the call wouldn't connect. The storm had knocked out the cell towers, and the landline had been disconnected months ago. Probably another bill Thomas couldn't pay. "Listen to me," she said, forcing her voice to remain calm while her mind raced through treatment options. "I need to get you to the hospital. Can you stand?" "No hospital," Thomas wheezed. "Can't afford. Won't put you through." "Don't you dare." Kiana's composure finally shattered. "Don't you dare give up on me now. Not after everything we've been through." She grabbed the mysterious envelope from the drawer, shoving it in her coat pocket before Thomas could protest. Whatever secrets it contained would have to wait. Right now, she had a patient to save, a patient who happened to be the most important person in her world. "My car," she said, sliding her arms under his shoulders. "We're driving to Memphis General." I don't care if I have to carry you myself. But as she helped Thomas to his feet, something in his expression stopped her cold. It wasn't just pain she saw there, or even fear. It was a resignation. The look of a man who'd already made peace with dying. There's something you need to know, he said, his voice barely audible above the storm. About why I found you that night. About who your real mother was. Kiana's world tilted on its axis. What are you talking about? The woman in the photograph, Thomas continued, each word a struggle. Her name was Angela Winters. She was your mother, Kiana, and she didn't abandon you. The words hit her like a physical blow. That's impossible. You said you found me on the doorstep. You said someone left me there during the storm. Someone did leave you there. Thomas's eyes filled with tears. I did. The room spun around Kiana as the implications crashed over her. You what? Angela was dying. Thomas whispered. Cancer. She was my nurse at the VA hospital when I was getting treatment for my PTSD. She had no family, no one to take care of you when she was gone. She begged me to give you a home. Kiana staggered backward, her mind reeling. You've been lying to me my entire life. I was protecting you. Angela made me promise never tell you the truth, unless something happened to me. She wanted you to grow up believing you were chosen, not given away out of desperation. Chosen. Kiana's voice cracked with betrayal and confusion. I was chosen, or were you just fulfilling some dying woman's last wish? Thomas reached for her with trembling hands. Both. The moment I held you, the moment I looked into your eyes, you became mine. Angela gave me the greatest gift anyone could give. She gave me you. The revelation should have answered questions, should have provided closure. Instead, it opened a chasm of new uncertainties that made Kiana feel like she was drowning. Everything she believed about her origin story, about Thomas's heroic decision to save an abandoned baby, had been built on a foundation of lies. But before she could process the emotional earthquake that was reshaping her understanding of her own life, Thomas collapsed again, this time unconscious. Kiana's medical training overrode her personal turmoil. She checked his pulse, his breathing, his pupil response. The symptoms painted a clear picture. He was having a heart attack, and without immediate intervention, he would die. The nearest hospital was 45 minutes away in good weather. In this storm, with flooded roads and downed power lines, it might as well have been on another planet. But as Kiana knelt beside the man who'd raised her, the man who'd apparently been keeping the secret of her true origins for over 3 decades, a wild, impossible idea began to form in her mind. She was one of the most skilled cardiac surgeons in the country. Her hands had performed miracles in state-of-the-art operating rooms with teams of specialists and millions of dollars worth of equipment. But she'd also trained in field medicine during her residency. She performed emergency procedures in disaster zones with nothing but basic supplies and sheer determination. The kitchen table was large enough. She had surgical instruments in her car. She always carried an emergency kit. The house had electricity, running water, and most importantly, it had something no hospital could provide: privacy to save the man she loved without the bureaucracy and insurance requirements that might delay treatment. It was insane. It was dangerous. It was probably illegal. It was also Thomas's only chance. Kiana pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number she needed. Dr. James Rodriguez had been her mentor during residency, and more importantly, he was the only person she trusted enough to talk her through a procedure this risky. The call connected to the 4th ring. Kiana, it's 3 in the morning. What's wrong? James, I need you to walk me through an emergency cardiac procedure. And I need you to not ask questions about where I am or why I'm doing this. A pause. What emergency are we talking about? Kiana looked down at Thomas, unconscious and growing paler by the minute. Life or death. And I'm about to perform surgery on my kitchen table. Another pause, longer this time. Jesus, Kiana, what have you gotten yourself into? I'm about to save my father's life, she said, her voice steady with newfound determination. And I'm going to need all the help I can get. As she hung up the phone and began gathering supplies, Kiana realized that everything in her life had led to this moment. Every hour of medical school, every surgery she'd performed, every life she'd saved, it had all been preparation for the most important operation of her career. The one where failure wasn't an option, because the patient was the man who'd given her everything. Even if everything had been built on a lie, she was only now beginning to understand. My heart is racing. Can you imagine performing surgery on your own father in your childhood kitchen? Drop a comment if you think Kiana can pull this off. And make sure you're subscribed because this story is about to get even more intense. The next 2 hours transformed Thomas Blake's modest kitchen into something that would have made any emergency room proud and terrified any medical board in the country. Kiana worked with the precision of a master craftsman and the desperation of a daughter who refused to lose the only parent she'd ever known. She'd cleared the kitchen table, sterilized every surface with bleach and boiling water, and arranged her emergency surgical kit with a methodical care that had made her legendary in operating rooms across 3 states. Dr. James Rodriguez's voice crackled through her phone speaker, propped against a makeshift 4-stand she constructed from a coat rack and medical tubing. Vitals: blood pressure 90/60 and dropping. Heart rate irregular at 115. He's stable for now, but barely. Kiana's hands moved with practiced efficiency as she prepared the anesthesia, a carefully calculated dose that would keep Thomas unconscious without overwhelming his already compromised system. "Kiana, I have to ask this one more time," James said, his voice tight with concern. "Are you absolutely certain you can't get him to a hospital? What you're attempting, even with your skills, the risk factors are. The roads are flooded, the bridges are out, and he doesn't have insurance." Kiana cut him off. "By the time I could get him to Memphis General, he'd be dead. This is his only shot." What she didn't tell James was the other reason she couldn't risk a hospital. The questions that would come. The insurance forms that would reveal Thomas had been hiding his condition for months. The social workers who might discover that a 78-year-old man had been living alone in a house that was falling apart, surviving on expired medications and pride. She couldn't let the system that had failed him continue to fail him now. "Okay," James said after a long pause. "Talk me through your setup." As Kiana described her improvised operating theater, she found herself remembering the countless times she'd watched Thomas fix broken things around the house. He taught her that sometimes the best solutions came not from having perfect tools, but from understanding how to make do with what you had. "The irony isn't lost on me," she murmured as she made the first incision. "He spent my whole childhood teaching me to be resourceful, and now I'm using those lessons to save his life." "What was that?" James asked. "Nothing. Just talking to my patient." But Thomas wasn't just her patient. As Kiana worked to repair the damaged arteries around his heart, she found herself having the conversation she'd been avoiding for months. "You stubborn, impossible man," she whispered as she carefully placed a bypass graft. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice you were sick? Did you think I'd just let you fade away without a fight?" Her hands moved with the muscle memory of thousands of procedures, but her mind was reeling from the revelations of the past few hours. Angela Winters, her real mother, a woman who'd loved her enough to find her the perfect father, even if it meant giving her up. "Tell me about the blocked artery near the anterior wall." James's voice brought her back to the present. 90% occlusion. "I'm going to need to do a full bypass here." Kiana's voice was steady, professional, but inside she was fighting a war between her medical training and her emotions. This was the man who'd braided her hair every morning before school, even though he'd had to watch YouTube videos to learn how. The man who'd sat through every school play, every science fair, every parent-teacher conference with the fierce pride of someone who'd chosen to be there. The man who'd worked double shifts at the factory to pay for her college applications, never once complaining about the sacrifice. "Kiana." James's voice carried a note of concern. "Your breathing just changed. Talk to me." "I'm fine," she lied, but her hand had started to tremble slightly. Not enough to compromise the surgery, but enough to remind her that she was operating on the edge of her emotional limits. "No, you're not. And that's okay. But I need you to center yourself. Whatever's going through your head right now, put in a box and deal with it later. Right now, there's only you, your hands, and work." Kiana closed her eyes for a moment, drawing on the meditation techniques she'd learned during her residency. When she opened them again, her hands were steady. "Better," James said, somehow sensing the change through the phone. "Now, tell me about the second bypass." As Kiana worked, the storm outside began to calm, but the emotional tempest inside her was just beginning. Every suture she placed was a question she couldn't answer. Every repair she made to Thomas's heart reminded her of all the ways he'd repaired hers over the years. "He never told me about my mother," she said softly as she worked on the final bypass. 23 years, and he let me believe I was abandoned. "Maybe he was protecting you," James suggested gently. "From what? The truth? The knowledge that someone loved me enough to make sure I had a good home. Sometimes the truth is more complicated than we want it to be." Kiana paused in her work, thinking about the envelope in her coat pocket. The letter Thomas had written for her to read after his death. Whatever secrets it contained, she wasn't sure she was ready to face them. "James, what if I save his life and then discover I can't forgive him for lying to me?" The question hung in the air like smoke, heavy and suffocating. "Then you'll deal with that when the time comes," James said finally. "But right now, you're not his daughter. You're his surgeon, and surgeons save lives first, ask questions later." The wisdom in those words steadied her. Kiana returned to her work with renewed focus, her hands moving with a precision that had made her one of the youngest department heads in her hospital's history. "Final sutures are going in now," she reported. "Heart rhythm is stabilizing. Blood pressure is coming up. Vitals, 100/70. Heart rate steady at 85. James, I think we did it." The relief in her voice was audible, but it was tempered by exhaustion and the knowledge that the hardest part wasn't the surgery itself. It was everything that would come after. "You did it," James corrected. "That was some of the finest field surgery I've ever guided someone through. Your father is lucky to have you." As if summoned by those words, Thomas's eyes fluttered open. His gaze was unfocused at first, clouded by anesthesia and pain medication, but when he saw Kiana leaning over him, a smile spread across his face. "Angel," he whispered, the words slurred but unmistakable. "I'm here, Daddy," Kiana said, tears streaming down her face as she checked his pulse one more time. Strong and steady. "I'm right here. Did I dream it? About Angela? About your mother?" Kiana's heart clenched. Even in his post-surgical haze, Thomas was worried about the secrets he'd revealed. "No, you didn't dream it. We're going to talk about all of it. But right now, you need a rest." "The letter," Thomas mumbled, his eyes already drifting closed again. "In the drawer. It explains everything." As Thomas slipped back into unconsciousness, this time the peaceful sleep of healing rather than the gray unconsciousness of dying, Kiana pulled the envelope from her coat pocket. Her name was written on the front in Thomas's careful handwriting, but underneath it, in different ink, were words that made her breath catch. "The whole truth about why I chose you, and why your mother chose me." The envelope felt heavy in her hands, weighted with decades of secrets and carefully guarded truths. Part of her wanted to tear it open immediately, to finally understand the full story of how she'd come to be Thomas Blake's daughter. But another part of her was terrified of what she might find inside. Because sometimes, Kiana was beginning to understand, the truth was more complicated than love, more dangerous than lies, and more powerful than either. "I can barely breathe. The surgery was incredible, but now I'm dying to know what's in that letter. What do you think Thomas has been hiding all these years? Let me know in the comments. And if you're as invested in this story as I am, make sure you hit subscribe. We're about to uncover secrets that will change everything." Dawn broke over the Tennessee hills like a promise of redemption, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink that reminded Kiana of the watercolor paintings Thomas used to help her create at the kitchen table. The same table where she'd just performed the most important surgery of her career. Thomas was sleeping peacefully now, his color returning to normal, his breathing steady and strong. Kiana had moved him to the living room couch, surrounding him with pillows and blankets, transforming the space into a makeshift recovery room. Every few minutes, she checked his vitals, but her eyes kept drifting to the envelope that sat unopened on the coffee table like a loaded weapon. "Dr. Winters." James's voice came through her phone, which she kept on speaker throughout the night. "How's our patient?" "Stable. Better than stable, actually. His heart rhythm is perfect, blood pressure is normal, and he's been sleeping soundly for 3 hours." Kiana rubbed her exhausted eyes. "James, I can't thank you enough for." "Don't thank me yet. You're the one who just performed a miracle with kitchen utensils and sheer determination. But Kiana, you need to get him to a real hospital for follow-up care. What you did tonight bought him time, but he's going to need proper monitoring, medications, cardiac rehabilitation. I know. Kiana's voice was heavy with the weight of decisions she wasn't ready to make. I'll figure something out. After she hung up, the house fell into the kind of silence that demanded honesty. Kiana picked up the envelope with trembling hands, her name written in Thomas's careful script seeming to glow in the morning light. She tore it open. Inside were 3 items: a handwritten letter, a faded photograph, and a small velvet jewelry box that made her heart skip a beat. The photograph showed a younger Thomas in his army uniform, standing beside a beautiful black woman in a nurse's uniform. They were both smiling, but there was something in their eyes, a depth of connection that spoke of more than professional courtesy. On the back, someone had written, Thomas and Angela, Walter Reed Hospital, 1999. Some bonds transcend everything. Kiana's hand shook as she opened the letter. My dearest Kiana, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've discovered the truth I've carried for 23 years. I pray you can forgive an old man for keeping secrets, but I need you to understand why I made the choices I did. Your mother, Angela Winters, wasn't just my nurse at the VA hospital. She was the woman who saved my life in ways that had nothing to do with medicine. When I came back from Vietnam, I was broken, not just physically, but spiritually. The nightmares, the guilt, the feeling that I'd lost my soul somewhere in the jungle. Angela saw through all of that to the man I could be again. We fell in love, Kiana. Deeply, completely, impossibly in love. Kiana's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't the story Thomas had told her. This wasn't about a dying woman asking a stranger for help. This was about love. But this was 1999 in rural Tennessee. An interracial relationship between a white veteran and a black nurse. The world wasn't ready for us. We tried to make it work, meeting in secret, planning a future that seemed impossible. When Angela discovered she was pregnant with you, we were terrified and overjoyed in equal measure. We talked about running away together, starting fresh somewhere no one knew us. But then Angela got sick. The cancer was aggressive, and the treatments were experimental and expensive. I wanted to marry her immediately, to give you my name legally, to fight the disease together. But Angela was wiser than I was. She knew that if we married, if I adopted you officially, there would be questions. Social workers would investigate our relationship, our backgrounds, our ability to provide for a child. In 1999, a mixed-race couple in Tennessee faced scrutiny that could have resulted in you being taken away from both of us. So Angela made the hardest decision any mother could make. She decided to give you to me unofficially, to let the world believe you were abandoned, to sacrifice her own recognition as your mother so that you could have the stable, loving home she couldn't provide. Tears were streaming down Kiana's face now, blurring the words on the page. She wiped her eyes and continued reading. The night I found you on my doorstep was the night Angela died. She spent her last hours holding you, singing lullabies, telling you how much she loved you and how proud she was going to be of the woman you'd become. Then she wrapped you in her favorite blanket, kissed you goodbye, and asked me to take you home. I drove through that storm with you in my arms, knowing that I was about to become a single father to a biracial child in a town that would judge us both. But I also knew that you were the greatest gift Angela could have given me. Not just her daughter, but a piece of her heart that would live on. I never told you the truth because Angela made me promise to let you grow up believing you were chosen, not given away. She wanted you to feel wanted, not abandoned. She wanted you to see yourself as a miracle, not a burden. But you were both, Kiana. You were chosen, and you were a miracle. Every day I raised you, I felt Angela's presence. Every time you smiled, I saw her face. Every achievement, every milestone, every moment of joy. It was like having her back, if only for a little while. Kiana's hands were shaking so violently, she could barely hold the letter. She set it down and opened the small velvet box with trembling fingers. Inside was a simple gold ring with a small diamond. Nothing fancy, but clearly chosen with love. Engraved on the inside were the words, "For Angela, forever yours, T." The engagement ring Thomas had never gotten to give her mother. She picked up the letter again, desperate to read the rest. I kept Angela's ring all these years, waiting for the right time to tell you about her, about us, about the love story that brought you into existence. I wanted you to know that you weren't the product of abandonment or desperation. You were the product of a love so deep that your mother was willing to sacrifice everything, including her own recognition as your parent, to ensure you had the best possible life. I'm sorry I waited so long to tell you. I'm sorry I let you grow up thinking you were unwanted. I'm sorry I was too much of a coward to face the possibility that learning the truth might change how you felt about me. But I'm not sorry I raised you. I'm not sorry I got to be your father. I'm not sorry I got to watch you become the incredible woman Angela always knew you'd be. You were her legacy, Kiana. Her intelligence, her compassion, her strength, it all lives in you. And if I did my job right, if I loved you the way she would have wanted me to, then maybe I've honored the promise I made to her that night in the storm. The house is yours now, along with everything in it. But more than that, the truth is yours. Do with it what you will. All I ask is that you remember that every choice I made, every lie I told, every secret I kept, it was all because I loved you. Because Angela loved you. Because you were worth every sacrifice. Be happy, my darling girl. Be proud of who you are and where you came from. And know that somewhere, your mother is watching over you with the same pride that has filled my heart every day since you became mine. All my love, always. Daddy. P.S. There's one more thing in the box. Angela wanted you to have it when you were old enough to understand what it meant. With shaking hands, Kiana looked back into the velvet box. Beneath the ring was a small folded piece of paper. She opened it to find a birth certificate, her original birth certificate. Father, Thomas Michael Blake. Mother, Angela Marie Winters. Child, Kiana Angela Blake. They had been married. Somehow, someway, in the brief time between her birth and Angela's death, they had made it official. Kiana wasn't adopted. She wasn't abandoned. She was exactly what she'd always believed herself to be, Thomas Blake's daughter. But she was also Angela Winters' daughter. And the woman who had given birth to her hadn't been a stranger who left her on a doorstep. She had been a woman who loved Thomas Blake enough to marry him, and who loved her daughter enough to ensure she had a father who would move heaven and earth to give her the best possible life. Kiana looked over at Thomas, sleeping peacefully on the couch, and felt her heart break and heal simultaneously. Everything she believed about her origin story was both true and false. She had been chosen. She had been wanted. She had been loved. But she had also been lied to for 23 years. The question now was whether love was enough to forgive the lies. Whether understanding the reasons behind the deception was enough to heal the betrayal. And whether the daughter of Angela Winters and Thomas Blake was strong enough to build a new relationship with her father based on truth, instead of the beautiful fiction they'd both been living. I'm literally crying. The love story behind Kiana's birth is both heartbreaking and beautiful. What do you think? Can she forgive Thomas for keeping the secret? Drop your thoughts below and make sure you're subscribed because this emotional roller coaster is far from over. The sound of Thomas stirring on the couch made Kiana quickly fold the letter and slip it back into the envelope. She wasn't ready to confront him about what she'd learned. Not when he was still recovering from surgery. Not when her own emotions were a hurricane of love, betrayal, gratitude, and rage. Kiana. Thomas's voice was stronger now, more alert. Sweetheart, what time is it? Almost noon, she said, forcing her voice to remain steady as she checked his pulse. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck, but better. Clearer. Thomas tried to sit up, wincing at the pain from his incisions. Did you really perform surgery on me in my own kitchen? Don't sound so surprised. You raised me to be resourceful, remember? Thomas studied her face with the keen perception that had made him such a good father. You've been crying, and you look like you haven't slept. I've been worried about you, Kiana said, which was true, even if it wasn't the whole truth. Before Thomas could probe deeper, Kiana's phone rang. The caller ID made her stomach drop. Dr. Patricia Chun, Chief of Surgery at Memphis General. I have to take this, Kiana said, stepping into the kitchen. Dr. Winters. Patricia's voice was crisp with authority and barely contained fury. Would you care to explain why you missed your surgery this morning? And why did Dr. Rodriguez call me at 6 a.m. asking hypothetical questions about emergency cardiac procedures? Kiana closed her eyes. In her desperation to save Thomas, she'd completely forgotten about her scheduled surgery. A complex procedure on a 12-year-old boy with a congenital heart defect. Patricia, I can explain. You missed surgery on a child, Kiana. A child whose family has been waiting 3 months for this procedure. Do you have any idea what that means for your career? For your reputation? The words hit Kiana like physical blows. She'd built her entire professional life on reliability, on being the surgeon who never let personal issues interfere with patient care. In one night, she'd thrown it all away. I had a family emergency, Kiana said weakly. A family emergency that required you to perform unauthorized surgery outside of a hospital setting. Because that's what James Rodriguez implied when he called asking about cardiac bypass procedures using improvised equipment. Kiana's blood ran cold. If the medical board found out what she'd done, she could lose her license. Everything she'd worked for, everything Thomas had sacrificed to help her achieve, could disappear in an instant. Patricia, please. I can explain everything if you just give me. You have 24 hours to get back to Memphis and provide a full explanation to the medical board. If you're not here by tomorrow afternoon, I'll have no choice but to recommend your immediate suspension pending investigation. The line went dead. Kiana stared at her phone, watching her career crumble in real time. She was one of the youngest department heads in the hospital's history, a surgeon who'd been featured in medical journals, a woman who'd broken barriers and inspired others to follow in her footsteps. And she'd thrown it all away to save a man who'd been lying to her for 23 years. Kiana. Thomas's voice came from the living room. Everything okay? She walked back to find him sitting up, his color much improved, but his eyes filled with concern. Who was that on the phone? My boss. I missed a surgery this morning because I was here saving your life. Thomas's face went pale. Oh, sweetheart, what does that mean for your career? It means I might lose everything. Kiana's voice was flat, emotionless. My job, my license, my reputation. Everything I've worked for since I was 18 years old. No. Thomas struggled to stand, ignoring Kiana's protests. No, I won't let you sacrifice your career for me. Call them back. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them. Tell them what, Thomas? Kiana's composure finally cracked. Tell them I performed unauthorized surgery in a kitchen because my father was too proud to go to a hospital. Tell them I risked everything to save a man who's been lying to me my entire life. The words hung in the air like poison gas, toxic and suffocating. Thomas sank back onto the couch, his face crumbling with understanding. You read the letter. I read the letter. Kiana's voice was barely above a whisper. I know about Angela. I know about marriage. I know about everything you've been hiding from me. Kiana, please let me explain. Explain what? How did you let me grow up thinking I was abandoned? How do you let me spend years in therapy trying to understand why my birth mother didn't want me? How you watched me struggle with identity issues and never once thought to tell me the truth? Thomas reached for her, but Kiana stepped back. I was protecting you. You were protecting yourself. The words exploded out of her with 23 years of suppressed questions and doubts. You were protecting yourself from having to explain why you married a black woman in 1999. You were protecting yourself from having to deal with the complicated truth instead of the simple story about the good white man who saved the abandoned black baby. That's not fair, and you know it. Fair. Kiana laughed bitterly. You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that I just destroyed my career to save a man who couldn't trust me with the truth about my own mother? Is it fair that I'm about to lose everything I've worked for because I love you too much to let you die? Thomas's eyes filled with tears. I never wanted this for you. I never wanted you to sacrifice anything for me. But that's what love is, isn't it? Kiana's voice broke. Sacrifice. Angela sacrificed her recognition as my mother. You sacrificed your reputation to raise me. And now I've sacrificed my career to save you. It's just one big chain of people giving up pieces of themselves for love. Kiana, the worst part is, I understand why you did it. I understand why Angela made the choices she made. I even understand why you kept the secret all these years. But understanding doesn't make the betrayal hurt less. Kiana walked to the window, staring out the property where she'd grown up, where she'd learned to ride a bike and climb trees and believe in herself. I have to go back to Memphis. I have to try to salvage what's left of my career. And then what? Thomas asked quietly. I don't know. Kiana's voice was hollow with exhaustion and heartbreak. I honestly don't know. Will you come back? The question hung between them like a bridge that might collapse under the weight of honesty. I don't know that either, Kiana said finally. I love you, Thomas. I will always love you. You're my father in every way that matters. But I don't know if I can forgive you for this. I don't know if I can trust you again." Thomas nodded slowly, tears streaming down his face. "I understand. Do you? Because I'm not sure I do." Kiana turned to face him one last time. "I spent my entire life trying to be worthy of the love you gave me, trying to prove that the abandoned baby you saved was worth the sacrifice. And now I find out that none of it was real. The abandonment, the rescue, the heroic choice to raise me despite the odds. It was all a story. The love was real," Thomas said desperately. "Everything else might have been a story, but the love was always real." Kiana stared at him for a long moment, memorizing his face, trying to reconcile the man who'd raised her with the man who deceived her. "I know," she said finally. "That's what makes this so hard." She gathered her things, leaving behind the medical equipment she'd used to save his life, taking only her purse and the envelope containing the truth she wasn't sure she wanted to carry. At the door, she turned back one last time. "Take care of yourself, Thomas. And next time you're sick, go to a real hospital. Kiana, please." But she was already walking away, leaving behind the man who'd given her everything and the house where she'd learned what love looked like, even when it was built on lies. As she drove away from the only home she'd ever known, Kiana realized that saving Thomas's life had been the easy part. Learning to live with the truth was going to be the real challenge. "My heart is absolutely shattered." The pain in both of their voices is devastating. Do you think Kiana will be able to forgive Thomas? Can their relationship survive this revelation? Share your thoughts in the comments. I need to know I'm not crying alone. And if you're as emotionally invested as I am, hit that subscribe button, because we're heading toward what I hope will be a healing conclusion. 3 weeks later, Kiana sat in the sterile conference room at Memphis General, facing a panel of 5 medical board members who held her career in their hands. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead like angry wasps, and the smell of disinfectant couldn't quite mask the underlying scent of fear and desperation that seemed to permeate every hospital disciplinary hearing. "Dr. Winters," said Dr. Margaret Foster, the board chairwoman, her voice as cold as the stethoscope around her neck. "You've admitted to performing unauthorized surgery outside of a medical facility, using non-sterile equipment, without proper backup or emergency protocols. Do you understand the severity of these violations?" "I do," Kiana replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "And yet you maintain that your actions were justified?" Kiana looked around the table at the 5 faces staring back at her. Colleagues who'd once respected her, mentors who believed in her potential, administrators who'd celebrated her achievements. Now they looked at her like she was a stranger who'd betrayed everything they stood for. "My father was dying," she said simply. "The roads were flooded, the phones were down, and he had no insurance. I made a choice to save his life using the skills you taught me." "Your father," Dr. Foster repeated, consulting her notes. "Thomas Blake, a man who, according to your own testimony, had been hiding his medical condition from you for 8 months. Yes, a man who refused proper medical care and put you in an impossible position." Kiana's jaw tightened. "A man who raised me, loved me, and gave me the foundation that made me the surgeon I am today." Dr. James Rodriguez, who'd been silent throughout most of the hearing, finally spoke up. "Margaret, if I may." Dr. Winters performed a flawless cardiac bypass under impossible conditions. The patient survived, recovered completely, and is now receiving proper follow-up care. From a purely medical standpoint, what she accomplished was extraordinary. From a legal and ethical standpoint, it was reckless endangerment, Dr. Foster shot back. What if something had gone wrong? What if the patient had died? What if Dr. Winters had been injured? The liability issues alone. But none of that happened, interrupted Dr. Sarah Kim, the youngest member of the board. "And isn't our primary obligation to save lives? Isn't that why we all became doctors?" The room fell silent as the board members exchanged glances. Kiana could feel the tide of the conversation shifting, but she wasn't sure in which direction. "Dr. Winters," Dr. Foster said finally, "you missed a scheduled surgery on a pediatric patient to perform this unauthorized procedure. How do you justify that decision?" This was the question Kiana had been dreading, the one that cut to the heart of her professional ethics. "I can't justify it," she said quietly. "Missing that surgery was inexcusable. I let down a child and his family, and I violated the trust they placed in me. If you decide to suspend my license, I'll understand. However, she continued, her voice growing stronger, I want you to know that Dr. Martinez has successfully performed that surgery the following day. The child is recovering well and will make a full recovery. And while I can't undo my absence, I can promise you that I've learned from this experience. Dr. Foster leaned forward. What exactly have you learned, Dr. Winters? Kiana took a deep breath, thinking about the past 3 weeks of sleepless nights, unanswered phone calls to Thomas, and soul-searching that had left her emotionally raw, but somehow clearer about who she was and what she valued. I've learned that being a good doctor isn't just about following protocols and avoiding liability. It's about making impossible choices in impossible situations and living with the consequences. I've learned that sometimes the most important surgery you'll ever perform won't be in an operating room, and the most important patient you'll ever save won't be a stranger. She paused, her voice catching slightly. And I've learned that love makes us do things that don't make sense on paper, but make perfect sense in our hearts. The board member sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Dr. Rodriguez spoke. I'd like to share something with the board, he said, pulling out his phone. After Dr. Winters' unauthorized surgery, I was curious about the outcome. So I contacted the patient, Mr. Blake, to check on his recovery. Kiana's heart stopped. She hadn't spoken to Thomas since the day she'd left his house. Despite his daily calls and text messages, she'd been too angry, too hurt, too confused to face him. Mr. Blake is not only recovering well, Dr. Rodriguez continued, but he's also been telling everyone in his small town about his daughter, the surgeon who saved his life. The local newspaper ran a story about it. The mayor wants to give Dr. Winters a key to the city, and 3 other elderly residents have finally agreed to seek medical treatment for conditions they've been hiding because they were inspired by Mr. Blake's story. Dr. Rodriguez looked directly at Kiana. Sometimes, Dr. Winters, breaking the rules saves more than just one life. Dr. Foster shuffled her papers, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the hearing was taking. That's all very touching, but we can't set a precedent that allows doctors to perform surgery wherever they please. No, agreed Dr. Kim, but we can recognize that exceptional circumstances sometimes require exceptional responses. Dr. Winters didn't perform this surgery for glory or convenience. She did it because she's a healer, and healers heal. The debate continued for another hour, but Kiana found herself thinking not about her career or the board's decision, but about Thomas, about the daily voicemails he'd been leaving, each one shorter and more defeated than the last, about the text messages that had evolved from explanations to apologies, to simple statements of love. About the fact that she'd been so focused on the lies he'd told that she'd forgotten about the truth he'd lived every single day for 23 years. Finally, Dr. Foster called for a recess so the board could deliberate. As Kiana sat alone in the hallway, her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Dr. Winters, this is Ethel Henderson, your father's neighbor. I thought you should know that Thomas collapsed yesterday and is in the hospital. He's been asking for you. Room 314, Mercy General, Clarksville. Kiana stared at the message, her hands shaking. Thomas was sick again, alone again, and this time, she wasn't there to save him. Without thinking, she stood up and walked toward the exit. Her career, the hearing, the board's decision, none of it mattered if Thomas was dying while she sat in a conference room, nursing her wounded pride. Dr. Winters, Dr. Rodriguez appeared beside her. Where are you going? The board is about to reconvene. Kiana looked at him, this man who'd mentored her, who'd talked her through the most important surgery of her life, who just defended her to his colleagues. My father needs me, she said simply. Dr. Rodriguez smiled. Then go. I'll handle the board. But my career, we'll be here when you get back. Some things are more important than careers, Kiana. You taught me that 3 weeks ago when you chose love over protocol. As Kiana ran toward her car, her phone rang. Dr. Foster's name appeared on the screen. Dr. Winters, the board has reached a decision. We're placing you on probation for 6 months, with mandatory ethics training and supervised surgeries. But we're not suspending your license. Kiana stopped running, tears streaming down her face. Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Kim. They convinced us that the medical profession needs more doctors who are willing to risk everything to save a life, not fewer. As Kiana drove toward Clarksville, toward the man who'd raised her, and the conversation they should have had weeks ago, she realized that sometimes the most important healing happened not in operating rooms, but in the spaces between hearts that had been broken and were ready to mend. Sometimes, love really was enough to bridge the gap between truth and forgiveness. She just hoped she wasn't too late to find out. I'm getting chills. Kiana is finally ready to face Thomas. But will she make it in time? The board's decision gives me hope, but I'm terrified about what she'll find at the hospital. What do you think is going to happen? Drop your predictions below and make sure you're subscribed. We're racing toward the conclusion, and I can barely handle the suspense. Kiana burst through the doors of Mercy General like a woman possessed, her heels clicking against the linoleum with the urgency of a heartbeat. The familiar smell of antiseptic and floor wax should have been comforting. This was her world, after all, but tonight it felt like walking into a nightmare. Room 314, she gasped to the nurse at the reception desk, not bothering to explain who she was or why she was there at nearly midnight. Visiting hours are. I'm Dr. Kiana Winters. Thomas Blake is my father. The nurse's expression softened immediately. Oh, Dr. Winters. He's been asking for you. Third floor. Turn left off the elevator. Kiana's hand shook as she pressed the elevator button, her mind racing through worst-case scenarios. Had Thomas's heart failed again? Had the surgery she performed 3 weeks ago somehow caused complications? Had her anger and pride cost her the chance to say goodbye to the man who'd given her everything? The elevator doors opened on the third floor, and Kiana ran down the hallway, her medical training automatically cataloging the sounds around her. The steady beep of monitors, the soft conversations of night shift nurses, the occasional call button chiming for patient rooms. Room 314 was at the end of the hall, and through the partially open door, Kiana could see a figure lying in the hospital bed, connected to a foreign heart monitor. But what stopped her cold was the sound of voices, multiple voices, coming from inside the room. And then she performed the whole surgery right there on my kitchen table. Thomas was saying, his voice weak but animated. My daughter, the surgeon. Can you believe it? That's incredible, Mr. Blake, came an unfamiliar voice. She must be very skilled. Skilled doesn't begin to cover it, Thomas replied. She's brilliant. Always has been, even as a little girl. I remember when she was 7, she found a bird with a broken wing and insisted on making a splint out of popsicle sticks and medical tape. Kiana pressed herself against the wall outside the door, tears streaming down her face as she listened to Thomas tell stories about her childhood to what sounded like a room full of strangers. Even here, even sick and alone in a hospital bed, he was bragging about her accomplishments with the fierce pride that had defined their relationship since the day he'd found her. Mr. Blake, came another voice, this one female and professional. Your daughter sounds wonderful, but you really should try to get some rest. Your heart needs. My heart is fine, Thomas interrupted. It's my soul that's broken. I hurt the most important person in my life, and I don't know how to fix it. The raw pain in his voice made Kiana's knees buckle. She leaned against the wall, listening to the man who'd raised her pour his heart out to strangers because his daughter had been too proud and too hurt to answer his calls. Have you tried telling her how you feel? Asked the first voice. Every day for 3 weeks, Thomas replied. But she won't talk to me, and I don't blame her. I lied to her about the most important thing in her life, who her mother was, how she came to be mine. I thought I was protecting her, but I was really just protecting myself from having to explain the complicated truth. What was the truth? Asked the female voice gently. Thomas was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. The truth was that I loved her mother more than I thought it was possible to love another human being. Angela was. She was everything good in the world wrapped up in one person. Smart, kind, funny, brave. She saw past my scars, the visible ones and the invisible ones, and somehow convinced me I was worth loving. Kiana closed her eyes, picturing the photograph she'd seen of Thomas and Angela together, the way they'd looked at each other like they'd found their missing pieces. When Angela got sick, Thomas continued, when we knew she was dying, she made me promise to take care of Kiana. But more than that, she made me promise to let Kiana grow up believing she was wanted, not given away out of desperation. Angela was terrified that if Kiana knew the truth, that her mother had died of cancer, that we'd only been married for 3 days before Angela passed, she'd grow up feeling like a burden instead of a blessing. So you let her believe she was abandoned? The first voice asked. I let her believe she was chosen, Thomas corrected. Because she was chosen. Every single day for 23 years. I chose to be her father. Every scraped knee I bandaged, every bedtime story I read, every parent-teacher conference I attended, every college application fee I paid. It was all a choice. And I'd make the same choice again in a heartbeat. Kiana couldn't take it anymore. She pushed open the door and stepped into the room, her heart breaking at the sight of Thomas looking so small and fragile in the hospital bed. Around him sat 3 people she didn't recognize, 2 nurses and what appeared to be a chaplain. Daddy, she whispered. Thomas's eyes widened, and for a moment, Kiana thought he might be hallucinating. Kiana? Sweetheart, is that really you? It's me, she said, moving to his bedside as the other visitors quietly excused themselves, sensing that this was a private moment that had been 3 weeks in the making. How did you know I was here? Mrs. Henderson texted me. Kiana reached for his hand, noting that his color was good, his breathing steady. What happened? Are you okay? I'm fine now, Thomas said, squeezing her fingers. Just some chest pains that turned out to be anxiety, not my heart. The doctors say the surgery you performed was perfect. No complications, no problems. My heart is stronger than it's been in years. Then why are you here? Thomas looked down at their joined hands. Because I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't function knowing that I'd lost you. The chest pain started a few days ago, and I thought maybe my heart was giving out from the stress of losing my daughter. Kiana felt fresh tears spill down her cheeks. You didn't lose me, Daddy. I needed time to process everything, to understand. And do you? Understand, I mean. Kiana thought about the past 3 weeks, about the anger that had slowly transformed into something deeper and more complex. I understand that you and Angela made impossible choices in an impossible situation. I understand that you were trying to protect me from pain that you thought I couldn't handle. I understand that every decision you made came from love. Thomas's eyes filled with hope. Does that mean you can forgive me? I forgave you the moment I walked into this room and heard you telling strangers about how proud you are of me, Kiana said. But more than that, I realized something during the drive here. What's that? I realized that I've been so focused on the lies you told that I forgot about the truth you lived. You didn't just tell me I was chosen. You showed me every single day. You didn't just say you loved me. You proved it with every sacrifice you made, every dream you put aside to help me achieve mine. Kiana climbed onto the narrow hospital bed, curling up beside Thomas the way she had when she was small and scared. I also realized that I'm exactly like you. What do you mean? I mean, I've been lying too. To myself, mostly. I've been telling myself that I was angry about the deception, but really I was terrified. Terrified of what? Terrified that if I learned the whole truth about my origins, I might discover that our relationship wasn't as special as I thought it was. That maybe you only raised me out of obligation to a dying woman, not because you actually wanted me. Thomas wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. Oh, sweetheart, you were never an obligation. You were a gift. The greatest gift Angela could have given me. I know that now, Kiana whispered. And I know something else too. What's that? I know that Angela made the right choice when she picked you to be my father. Because you didn't just raise me. You taught me how to love unconditionally, how to fight for what matters, how to make impossible choices when someone you love needs you. Thomas pulled back to look at her face. You mean that? I mean it. And I have something to tell you too. What? Kiana smiled through her tears. The medical board decided not to suspend my license. I'm on probation for 6 months, but I get to keep practicing medicine, which means I can take care of you properly from now on. Kiana, you don't need to. Yes, I do. Because that's what family does. We take care of each other, even when it's complicated, even when it's scary, even when it means making sacrifices. Thomas studied her face with the same intensity he'd shown when she was a child, and he was trying to determine if she was telling the truth about finishing her homework. What kind of sacrifices? Well, Kiana said, settling more comfortably against his shoulder, I've been thinking about opening a practice closer to home, maybe in Clarksville. There's a real need for cardiac specialists in rural areas. And I think Angela would approve of me using my skills to help people who might not otherwise have access to quality care. You give up your position in Memphis, your department head role. I'm not giving up anything, Kiana corrected. I'm choosing something better. I'm choosing to be close to my family. I'm choosing to honor both my parents by using the gifts they gave me to make a difference in the world. Thomas was quiet for a long moment, and Kiana could practically hear the wheels turning in his head. There's something else, isn't there? Kiana grinned. You know me too well. Yes, there's something else. I want to start a foundation. The Angela Winters Foundation for Rural Healthcare. I want to provide medical care to people who can't afford it. People like you who might otherwise suffer in silence because they're too proud or too poor to seek help. Kiana, I want to tell Angela's story, Daddy. I want people to know about the nurse who loved so deeply that she was willing to give up everything to ensure her daughter had the best possible life. I want her sacrifice to mean something beyond just our family. Thomas was crying now, tears of joy and pride and overwhelming love. She will be so proud of you, so incredibly proud. I hope so, because I'm proud to be your daughter, and I'm proud to be yours too. They held each other in the quiet hospital room, two people who'd found their way back to each other through the complicated landscape of love, loss, and forgiveness. Outside, the sun was beginning to rise over the Tennessee hills, painting the sky in shades of hope and new beginnings. Daddy, Kiana said softly. Yes, sweetheart. Tell me about her. Tell me about Angela. I want to know everything. How you met, what she was like, what she loved, what made her laugh. I want to know my mother. Thomas smiled, his heart full for the first time in 3 weeks. She was a lot like you, actually. Stubborn, brilliant, determined to save everyone whether they wanted to be saved or not. As Thomas began to tell the story of Angela Winters, the woman who'd loved them both enough to bring them together, Kiana realized that some truths were worth waiting for, some forgiveness was worth fighting for, and some love was strong enough to survive anything. Even the complicated, messy, beautiful truth of how a family is really made. I'm sobbing happy tears. The reunion between Kiana and Thomas is everything I hoped for and more. But we're not done yet. There's still one more part to this incredible journey. What do you think the future holds for them? Share your thoughts below and make sure you're subscribed because the conclusion is going to be absolutely perfect. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the newly renovated Blake Family Medical Center, casting golden light across the waiting room where families from 3 counties had gathered for the facility's grand opening. What had once been an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Clarksville had been transformed into a state-of-the-art medical facility that would have made Angela Winters proud. Dr. Kiana Blake, she'd legally changed her name 6 months ago to honor both her parents, stood at the podium, looking out at a crowd that included everyone who'd shaped her journey. Thomas sat in the front row, his color healthy and his smile radiant with pride. Beside him sat Mrs. Henderson, who'd become an unofficial grandmother figure and the center's volunteer coordinator. Dr. James Rodriguez had driven down from Memphis with several colleagues who'd wanted to witness this moment. Even Dr. Patricia Chun was there, having become one of Kiana's strongest supporters after seeing the impact of her work. But it was the photograph displayed prominently behind the podium that made Kiana's heart swell with emotion. A beautiful portrait of Angela Winters in her nurse's uniform, with the inscription, "In memory of Angela Winters, RN, a healer who understood that love is the most powerful medicine." When I was 7 years old, Kiana began, her voice carrying clearly through the packed room. I found a bird with a broken wing in our backyard. I was determined to fix it, to make it whole again, even though I had no idea what I was doing. She smiled at Thomas, who chuckled at the memory. My father, who'd already learned that arguing with me was futile, helped me fashion a tiny splint out of popsicle sticks and medical tape. We fed that bird with an eyedropper, kept it warm, and watched over it for weeks until it was strong enough to fly again. Kiana paused, looking around the room at faces that had become familiar over the past year. Farmers who'd finally gotten treatment for chronic conditions, elderly residents who no longer had to choose between medication and groceries, children who'd received life-saving care regardless of their family's ability to pay. I didn't know it then, but that bird was my first patient, and my father was teaching me the most important lesson any doctor can learn. That healing isn't just about medical knowledge or surgical skill. It's about refusing to give up on someone, even when the situation seems hopeless. The crowd murmured in agreement, and Kiana caught sight of a familiar face in the back of the room. Dr. Marcus Thompson. No, she corrected herself, remembering the name restriction. Dr. David Thompson, a young resident from Memphis General who'd been inspired by her story to pursue rural medicine. He'd be joining the center's staff next month, bringing their total to 5 full-time physicians and 12 nurses. This medical center exists because of a chain of love that began long before I was born, Kiana continued. It exists because a nurse named Angela Winters believed that everyone deserves compassionate care, regardless of their circumstances. It exists because a war veteran named Thomas Blake understood that love means making sacrifices for the people who matter most. And it exists because all of you, this community, believe that healthcare is a right, not a privilege. She gestured toward the modern equipment visible through the glass walls of the treatment rooms. We have everything here that you'd find in any major hospital: cardiac care, surgical suites, diagnostic imaging, emergency services. But more than that, we have something that can't be bought or installed. We have the understanding that every patient who walks through these doors is someone's child, someone's parent, someone's whole world. Thomas wiped tears from his eyes as Kiana's voice grew stronger, more passionate. This was the woman he'd raised, the daughter who'd inherited Angela's compassion and his determination, who'd found a way to honor both her parents while forging her own path. 6 months ago, Kiana said, we treated our first patient, a farmer named Bill Henderson who'd been ignoring chest pain for 2 years because he couldn't afford to see a doctor. Today, Bill is healthy, his farm is thriving, and his granddaughter just started her first year of medical school, inspired by the care she witnessed here. The crowd erupted in applause as Bill Henderson stood up, his face beaming with gratitude and embarrassment at being singled out. That's what this place is about, Kiana continued when the applause died down. It's about second chances, about refusing to let anyone suffer in silence, about understanding that a community is only as strong as its most vulnerable members. She looked directly at Thomas, her voice softening with emotion. My father taught me that love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice you make every single day. Angela Winters made that choice when she entrusted her daughter to a man she knew would move heaven and earth to give her the best possible life. Thomas Blake made that choice every morning when he braided my hair, every evening when he helped with homework, every time he sacrificed his own comfort to ensure I had opportunities he'd never dreamed of. Kiana's voice caught slightly. And today, we're all making that choice together. We're choosing to believe that everyone deserves healing, that everyone deserves hope, that everyone deserves to be seen and valued and cared for. She reached in her pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, the same box that had contained Angela's engagement ring. But now it held something different, a simple gold locket that Thomas had given her for Christmas, containing photos of both her parents. Before we officially open these doors, Kiana said, I want to share something that my father told me recently. He said that the best way to honor the people we've lost isn't to mourn what they didn't get to see, but to live in a way that would make them proud. She opened the locket, looking down at the faces of the 2 people who'd shaped her into the woman she'd become. Angela Winters never got to see her daughter become a doctor, but her legacy lives on in every life we save here. She never got to hold her grandchildren, but her love continues through the compassion we show to every family that needs us. The crowd was silent now, hanging on every word. And Thomas Blake, Kiana continued, looking directly at her father, taught me that the most important surgery you'll ever perform isn't the one that gets written up in medical journals. It's the one you do because someone you love needs you, even when it's scary, even when it's risky, even when the whole world tells you it's impossible. Thomas stood up slowly, his eyes shining with tears and pride. I love you, sweetheart, he called out, his voice carrying across the room. I love you too, Daddy, Kiana replied, her own tears flowing freely now. And I love all of you for believing in this dream, for supporting this vision, for understanding that healthcare isn't just about treating illness. It's about treating people with dignity and respect and unconditional love. She moved toward the ribbons stretched across the main entrance, holding the oversized scissors that would officially open the Blake Family Medical Center. Angela Winters believed in the power of healing. Thomas Blake believed in the power of love. And together, they created something beautiful. Not just a daughter, but a legacy of compassion that will touch lives for generations to come. Kiana raised the scissors, looking out at the crowd one more time. This center is dedicated to everyone who's ever felt forgotten, overlooked, or left behind. You matter. Your health matters. Your life matters. And as long as these doors are open, you'll never have to face illness or injury alone. She cut the ribbon with a decisive snip, and the crowd erupted in cheers and applause. But what moved Kiana most was the sight of Thomas making his way through the crowd toward her, his arms open wide, his face radiant with the kind of joy that comes from watching your child exceed every dream you ever had for them. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered as he wrapped her in a hug that felt like coming home. "Angela would be so proud." "We did it, Daddy," Kiana whispered back. "We actually did it." "No, sweetheart," Thomas corrected gently. "You did it. You took the love we gave you and multiplied it into something that will help thousands of people. That's not just medicine. That's magic." As the crowd began to tour the facility, marveling at the equipment and meeting the staff, Kiana found herself standing in the main hallway, looking up at Angela's portrait. For just a moment, she could have sworn she saw her mother smile. "Thank you," she whispered to the photographer, "for choosing him, for choosing love, for making all of this possible." "Talking to yourself," came a familiar voice behind her. Kiana turned to find Dr. Rodriguez approaching, his expression warm with affection and pride. "Just thanking my mother for the best gift she ever gave me, which was a father who taught me that love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." James smiled. "Speaking of showing up, I have something for you." He handed her an envelope marked with the Memphis General logo. "What's this?" "An offer. The board wants you to head up our new rural outreach program. You'd split your time between here and Memphis, training other doctors to establish similar centers in underserved areas. They want to replicate what you've built here across the entire region." Kiana stared at the envelope, overwhelmed by the possibilities it represented. "James, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll think about it. The medical world needs more people like you. People who understand that the best medicine happens when you treat patients like family." As James walked away to join the tour, Kiana looked around at the bustling medical center, at the families already making appointments, at the staff members who'd left prestigious positions to join her mission. This was what love looked like when it was multiplied, when it was shared, when it was allowed to grow beyond the boundaries of a single family. Thomas appeared at her side, following her gaze around the facility. "Penny, for your thoughts." "I was just thinking about that bird," Kiana said. "The one with the broken wing." "What about it? You never told me what happened to it after it flew away." Thomas smiled, the same gentle smile that had comforted her through scraped knees and broken hearts and every challenge life had thrown at them. "It came back every spring for 3 years, always with a mate, sometimes with babies. It built its nest in the oak tree by your bedroom window, like it wanted to stay close to the people who'd helped it heal." Kiana felt tears spring to her eyes again. Really, I think it understood something that took me years to learn." "What's that?" "That when you're healed by love, you don't just fly away and forget. You come back. You build something beautiful. You create a legacy that lasts long after you're gone." Thomas put his arm around his daughter, looking out at the medical center that bore their family name, at the portrait of the woman who'd brought them together, at the community that had embraced their vision of compassionate care. "Your mother would be so proud," he said softly, "not just of what you've accomplished, but of who you've become. You're the best of both of us, Kiana. Angela's compassion and my stubbornness, her intelligence and my determination to never give up on the people we love." "I learned from the best," Kiana replied, leaning into his embrace. "Both of you." As the sun set over the Tennessee hills, painting the sky in shades of hope and promise, Kiana Blake stood in the medical center that represented everything she'd learned about love, sacrifice, and the power of second chances. Tomorrow, she'd start seeing patients, saving lives, and continuing the legacy that had begun with a nurse's dying wish and a veteran's promise to love unconditionally. But tonight, she was simply a daughter standing beside her father, grateful for the complicated, beautiful, imperfect love story that had brought her to this moment. Some stories, she realized, don't end happily ever after. They end happily ever forward, with the understanding that love isn't a destination, but a journey that continues with every choice to show up, to care, to heal, and to hope. And in the Blake Family Medical Center, surrounded by the community that had embraced her vision and the father who taught her that love was always worth the risk, Dr. Kiana Blake was ready for whatever came next. Because she'd learned the most important lesson of all, that the best way to honor the people who love you isn't to be perfect. It's to be brave enough to love others the way you've been loved, completely, unconditionally, and without reservation. And that kind of love, Kiana knew, could heal anything. I'm absolutely sobbing with joy. This story has taken us on such an incredible journey of love, sacrifice, forgiveness, and healing. The Blake Family Medical Center is the perfect tribute to both Angela and Thomas, and seeing Kiana honor both her parents while creating her own legacy is just beautiful. Thank you for taking this emotional journey with me. If this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, please share it with someone who needs to be reminded that love really can conquer all. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that celebrate the power of family, forgiveness, and second chances. Until next time, keep believing in the magic of love.